In this lesson, we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail, how we can initiate the AJAX call with an event. Because most of the time when you're creating some user interaction, you're going to want some kind of trigger in order to make those AJAX calls, so you don't usually load them right off the bat, although of course you can. So here what we want to do is we want to actually have some dynamic interaction. So I've added in the top here in the HTML, so a button, given an ID of my button, and I just have something called get data. So I've kept that container area there. I've given the get element by ID the my button, so I've added an event listener of click, and whenever it gets clicked, we run the function my function. So see, whenever we're clicking it, we're just right now console logging out hello. So ultimately what I want to do is I want to set all of this AJAX call to only run within the function. So I'm going to copy and paste this out. I'm going to get rid of hello there and beautify this so it's a little bit more readable. And also I've updated my data text to just say hello, hello world. So we don't necessarily need to only use JSON files in order to make use of AJAX. So they can work independently, but of course they do work really well together as well. So over here I've got my open get data text true, and then I'm doing my on ready state change where I'm initiating a function, and then this function, of course, I'm console logging out the contents there of the current object. And of course, there's one thing that I do want to note. Actually, the order doesn't really matter where you're presenting it. So any one of these methods, as long as we're setting this on ready state change, this essentially acts as a listener. So whenever there's a change on the ready state of that object, then it's going to fire off. So it actually doesn't matter if we place it above the open or if we do the open first. Either way, it'll work out the same way. So now when I refresh it and I click the data, we see that we're picking up all of these requests, and again we have a whole bunch of ready state changes. So we want to really fine-tune this, and we know that our ready state is changing, and that's where we're firing it off, and we want to take a quick look and make sure that our ready state is going to be equal to 4, because that is the open one and that's the one that we want to look for and use. So we just make sure that it's equal to 4, and then within there, then that's where we're going to run through our functionality. So just going to make sure everything's working. So now we only get that one ready state when it's equal to 4, and we're outputting that content. So there are another, you can also check status as well. So you can add in a condition and do a check of that object just to double check and make sure that your status is in fact equal to 200. And sometimes this is good practice in order to make sure that you're not running into any errors. By chance you might get a different value back. You might get a 500 or 404 or something, and even though you've made the connection to the file, you're not actually seeing it as a successful connection. So this is a way to double check and really make sure that what you're returning is what you actually want to access. So now we can console log out, and we've got a bunch of options here. So we can do the response text, we can just do the response by itself, and really it's coming back as the same. So there might be some instances where there might be some variation where you might want to take the text to make sure that you're only returning back text. So this response text, and then this is going to ensure that what's coming back is in fact that response text. So now every time we click it, we get the response text back from this data file, and we can see it in action. Now the really interesting thing is when you start combining AJAX with server-side functionality such as PHP or other languages. So that gives you that ability to really start making some really dynamic changes. And in the next lesson, we're going to briefly run through some really cool stuff that you can do with PHP in order to make some dynamic data being returned back into your JavaScript and make it more functional and interactive for users. So we're going to take a look at that in the upcoming lesson.